Welcome to the Get Published podcast, sponsored by Brodie Consulting Group. To get more information about our publishing and coaching services, go to getpublishedpodcast.com. Hello, I am Paul Brodie, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Get Published podcast, where we help authors get published with a proven system that works. Today, we're being joined by Dick Pirozzolo, author of Escape from Saigon. Dick, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Paul. Thank you for having me on. Certainly, writing and researching Escape from Saigon was an experience, living it and writing it. So I'm pleased to be talking with you today.
Excellent. Let's go ahead and get started. Question number one. What is the one piece of advice that you would give to a first-time author who is currently writing their book?
Oh, gosh. Well, the first piece of advice I would give is stick to it. The best, what I tell my dog is sit, stay. And, I think the key is to say, look, I'm going to devote, whether it's 2 hours, 3 hours a day, to sitting down at my computer or typewriter, or if you use yellow legal pads, it doesn't matter, but you got to devote that time each and every day to making it happen. And if you do that, you're just going to be sick of sitting there with nothing coming out, and you'll start to get some words out, and you'll start to string some words together. Now, everybody works differently. Some people like to have an outline. Some people like to do bubble outlines for their book. But it doesn't matter. You'll find your own way, and if you're sitting there and feeling like you're not inspired, then you work on an outline or work on some passages that might come in to the book 100 pages hence, but don't seem to fit in right now. But the idea just comes back to that discipline of spending not every single day, but 5 days a week, 2 or 3 hours a day, and you'll get it.
And what do you feel is the hardest part about getting published?
Oh gosh, getting somebody to like you. I guess I've been fortunate in that, I've always been known in the community. So, I've written and published about, 6 or so books. Escape from Saigon is my first work of fiction. It's a historical fiction, but prior to that, I wrote any number of books, mainly on traditional home building in America. And so I had a reputation for having knowledge in that industry, and the publishers always came to us, or came to me, and I think when I actually pursued a publisher was I ghost wrote a book, a biography called Oriental Rugs of the Silk Route by John Gregorian, and that's kind of an interesting story because I do public relations work, which is what puts food on the table, and Gregorian Oriental Rugs was a client, and John Gregorian said, geez, why don't you write up a little brochure, put some pictures in it, and we'll just do a little history of my life in the business. So he had a few words written, and I said, let's give it a shot. So I sent a letter off to Rizzoli, which is the biggest art book publisher in the world, and they came back with a letter and said, we'd like to sign a contract with you. So that was an easy one. The advice I give is keep pursuing. There are plenty of lists of agents. You don't have to. You've got Google, and you just keep Googling agents, Googling publishers, and just go one after another. Put together a good proposal. If it's a work of fiction or nonfiction, have at least 2 to 4 chapters written, and then the other part of selling a book to a publisher is they're in it for the money, and so you really want to be able to tell the publisher a little about yourself, what you've done, why you think you're the person to write that book, you want to do a little comparison of what books are out there that are similar to your books, and you want to have something that's similar. You don't want to just be out there all by yourself and say, nobody's ever written about this topic before, because nobody will believe you. And you want to go through the competing books, and then you want to analyze those, and then you want to tell the publisher how your book is going to differ from everything else that's on the market. You want to assure the publisher that you're going to be participating in the marketing and that you're willing to do book signings, go on the road, participate in book club events, whatever it takes. It's really it's like pick and shovel work, but it has to be done, and you just need to assure the publisher that you're going to do it. And you also need to give the publisher a synopsis of the entire story. So you may have 20,000 words written, but they want to know where the story is going. And you want to, in the synopsis, you want to give the publisher the beginning, the middle, and the end. They don't care about spoiler alerts. They want to know what kind of an ending you have planned for your book.
That's great advice. Thank you for sharing that. And I'd like to talk a little bit about marketing with you. So please share a marketing strategy that you've used in your book launches that has worked well.
Well, let's see. There's a strategy is to have a plan, and you want to do the initial launch, and you want to make certain that you're fully prepared for the pre-publicity launch, which is crucial. When you know your book is going to be coming out in 3 to 6 months, that's the time to to start promotion. And the key is you want to strive to get into Publishers Weekly. And if your publisher has a publicist, you really want to make sure they're pursuing Publishers Weekly, because that'll kick off the whole tone of your marketing program. You want to coordinate a decent press release with your publisher, and you want to go over it. And you want to make sure that the publicists with publishers are very busy. They often are overloaded with a number of different titles, and don't forget, your book is your baby, so you need to be the advocate for it. So anything you can do to support the publisher's effort is gold. Also, look for what I call circles of influence or circles of interest. Our book, Escape from Saigon, which I co-wrote with Michael Morris, who was a soldier during the Vietnam War. I was a public information officer, press officer, really, for the U.S. Air Force. And, we looked for people who would be interested in the book. We looked for segments of the market. Veterans were a good market for us, so we pursued veterans. The book focuses tremendously on what journalism was like in the 1970s and what it was like to be a war correspondent. So we pursued publications that were read by journalists, which is great, because journalists writing about your book is great, because they can read your book and then write about it and help you market it. The book had a strong female character in it, a TV correspondent, Lisette Vaux, and so we pursued the women's issue and went after women's groups and women's organizations that we felt would be interested in it. Also, you want to keep, just use your own life history to promote the book. I live in Wellesley, Mass. I went to the Wellesley bookseller, told them about the book, and they really launched the big debut opening. So that was gratifying. And then you want to promote that in local media. You want to get I don't know if you know people know what a PSA is, a public service announcement or a calendar announcement. And you want to make sure you get those announcements out. And if you do a book signing at a store, don't put it all on the bookstore people to do your marketing for you. You want to help them as much as you can, and you want to start getting just very short. They're called calendar announcements. You could read them in the. They're no different than when you're scanning the paper and you're looking for something to do on a Sunday afternoon, and just pattern your announcements after what you read in the paper, and start sending them out to applicable media. Two of the biggest draws I found are, there's two services. One is called Eventbrite, and the other one is a competing service called Eventsy. And all you have to do is, whenever you have an event coming up, is you just go online, you go to Eventbrite, and it's just basically you fill out a form and fill out a little detail, and they'll publish the announcement on their site. And what happens with Eventbrite is a lot of newspapers subscribe to it. So as a result of putting in a mention in Eventbrite, we got covered by the Boston Globe when we did the debut at the Wellesley bookstore. So it's those kinds of things. You always want to be thinking about marketing. You want to set up, if you're obviously going to be selling on Amazon, make sure you set up an Amazon authors page. Go on Goodreads, set up a page on Goodreads, and social media is free for the asking. Develop relationships with other authors. Help them out where you can, and they'll help you out. And I've helped other authors promote their books, and they've helped get the word out about my book. And it's whatever you can do. Just and it's an everyday thing. Once the book is written, start writing the next book. But spend 45 minutes a day thinking about how you can market your book, and you'll succeed.
Well, you just gave us a ton of value, and I really appreciate all the insight that you've given with the marketing strategies.
Yeah, I hope people can rewind the podcast, because there's a lot of that's a big information dump there. So, and all the steps are valid. So, I would heed every one of those.
Well, one thing I would like to touch on a little bit more is getting in the Publishers Weekly. Can you tell me a little bit more about that process and different strategies that you suggest to our audience?
The only way you're going to get in, and there's 2 or 3 other publications, and the name isn't the other name isn't coming to me right now, but it's really, you really need to go to your publisher and make sure they're doing it. And it's also, many are called and few are chosen. So if you don't make it, don't give up. But it's just an all-important first step.
Well, let's talk about your favorite book. So what is your favorite book, and what was the number one thing that you learned from it?
Let's see, my favorite book. Well, I just, I just read Anthony Bourdain's, got it right here, Kitchen. I just read Anthony Bourdain's Kitchen Confidential, which I really enjoyed. And I think what I learned about it was to really search your own soul and your own psyche, and really reach into who you are, and make sure you if you're writing about something and it's personal, make sure you show the warts along with the positive bits about you. I'm also a fan of Clive Cussler, and I'm reading Odessa Sea, which is a big kind of an aviation spy versus spy novel, and rereading The Quiet American by Graham Greene, which I don't think I could read it enough times or see the movie enough times. I always get something out of it, and especially since Escape from Saigon focused on a life in Saigon during the Graham Greene's novel takes place in the 50s when the war was starting, and Escape from Saigon takes place 20 years later when the war is really coming to its very end. So it was kind of interesting. It was an interesting book to read, and it was interesting because there were a lot of the events that happened in 1954 continued to happen in 75. Both books center on the experiences of journalists, so it was interesting to read about how little journalism had changed in those many years. And now from 75 to now, the journalism as a profession has gone through such a metamorphosis. I don't think if I woke up today and my job was to be a journalist, I think I'd become a shepherd.
And for a final question, what is your favorite quote and why?
My favorite quote? Whoa, that's a... Well, let's see. My favorite quote is a very short poem by Upton Sinclair. And I think I got my love of history and love of writing from Upton Sinclair, who wrote a number of famous books, The Jungle, Oil. Oil was made into a movie. And but he also wrote a whole series of books called the Lanny Budd Stories, where he took a child who was about 8 years old and traces his life as the son of a Connecticut gun merchant, a thinly veiled Colt Firearms a salesman, and traces his life all through World War I, World War II, and I think up until Korea. And he wrote a very short poem called that goes, "The golf links lie so near the mill that almost every day the laboring children can look out to see the men at play."
Well, Dick, I want to thank you for being a guest on the show. What is the best way for people to find you online?
Let's see. You can find me at www.escapefromsaigon.com.
Okay, I know you're on social media as well.
And I'm on Facebook. Just find me, Dick Pirozzolo. I'm easy to find. And if anybody wants to email any questions to me or seeking some advice, go for d.pirozzolo@gmail.com. And it's, I'll spell it for you, Pirozzolo. And it's d.pirozzolo@gmail.com. And I'll be happy to answer any questions anybody has, or if I can help somebody, some budding authors, get their book out and get it sold, always glad to pitch in.
Well, thank you again for being a guest on the show, and I wish you all the best in your author journey ahead.
Well, thank you so much. Appreciate your interest.
Thanks again for joining us today. To learn more about how to get your book published with a proven system that works, grab a free copy of my book at getpublishedpodcast.com.